Hello and welcome to DNSN Radio episode number 5. Today, instead of taking a deep dive into the league as it exists today, we're going to be looking at what the league could look like in the future by talking about everything that we know currently about Madden 17. It's going to be a little bit different show. I've done a lot of research digging into the EA developer blogs, the Dive Deep columns. I've dug up an interview with Rex Dickson, the director for EA Sports. I have access to a couple of game changers that I've been able to get some questions and feedback from. And so I'm going to combine all of that into one show, telling you everything that you can currently possibly know about Madden 17. And so excuse me while I geek out a little bit about gameplay next year and CFM and what it could offer. This might be a little bit longer show than normal. It's going to be definitely a different style, but let's just dive in. And so before we look at what EA is promising for Madden 17, let's go back and look at what they promised us for this year and see how that ended up so we can see how trustworthy they are as far as keeping what the promises that they're rolling out right now. And so the first thing that they promised us last year was the existence of organic gang tackles in their new sports engine. And guys, I'll be honest, when I got EA Early Access last year and spent 10 hours with the game, it was incredible to me. The first time that I saw a gang tackle. I mean, had Ryan Matthews hitting the hole off the right side. He gets hit by 3 guys at once and driven backwards, and it's something I'd never before seen in Madden, because before this year we never had the opportunity to see gang tackles. It was always one-on-one, and it was jaw-dropping to me to see that emulated in Madden, and they definitely accomplished that. The next thing they promised was the elimination of suction tackling. You guys that played in Madden 15, you remember this. You have a toss play, you're off the edge, you've got 4 yards on the defensive end, and all of a sudden he just suction tackles you and you fall down. It was frustrating, caused a lot of broken controllers for a lot of Madden players around the country, and they promised to eliminate suction tackling. Now, I'm not going to give them an accomplished on this because it still happens from time to time, but the range of suction tackling is much smaller and it's happened much less frequently, and so I'll give them a mostly accomplished on the elimination of suction tackling. They also promised the implementation of quick adjustments, that you would be able to make a defensive adjustment to any player on the field without actually clicking onto that player. And the controls took a little bit getting used to, but they definitely did that. You can now hot route any defensive player on any play without actually clicking onto him pre-snap. They promised ways to combat mobile quarterbacks through QB spy improvement logic, which they accomplished. Your QB spy now tracks the quarterback better. The quarterback's not able to swerve around him anymore, and with the clicking of the right stick, you can charge after the quarterback with the spy, even though you're not controlling him. And so they accomplished that. The next item is the first one that I'm going to say they failed on, and that is contain improvements. That when you do a QB contain, it was supposed to improve the logic of defensive ends, that when a quarterback leaves the pocket, they would disengage and chase the quarterback. And I say they failed in this aspect because, number one, you can't just QB contain on one side anymore. You could do that last year. You can't do it this year. You have to QB contain both defensive ends. And secondly, it just simply doesn't work. When a quarterback leaves the pocket, very often the defensive end, even on a contain, doesn't disengage. And so I say they failed there. And then they said that they were going to implement penalties, a realistic penalty system into the game, which they did implement, but I believe they massively overkilled, and we had to drastically tune penalties in the league. And I would still argue they happen too often, but I'm not going to dive into that. So what did they promise specifically for Connected Franchise? They promised dynamic drive goals, which they accomplished. These goals that pop up that give you XP every drive, adds a little bit of intrigue and strategy to the game. They promised chained weekly goals, which they also accomplished, where your goals will build upon each other, and as you complete goals, you'll move up the chain to bigger, more demanding goals that give more XP. They promised scouting changes, and they completely revamped scouting from the old system to the new system. You can argue whether that was a good change or not, but it was a change that they promised and did accomplish. What you can't argue being a good thing was the implementation of a combine. We now get realistic combine stats We no longer have to scout speed. We no longer have to scout strength because it's something that's readily available to everyone through the combine. And that's a massive upgrade for the immersion of CFM. They also promised to implement a new system called Sim to Win, which would allow you to eliminate computer games and resolve all computer games with a Sim to Win feature, which they did implement, but it's massively overkilled, resulting in huge blowouts and unrealistic stats. And then they promised confidence tuning. As last year, pretty much unless you won the Super Bowl, your team's confidence would be in the gutter. They went the other direction this year to where confidence is really irrelevant because almost everyone in the game has 99 confidence. And yet they did tune it. And so looking back at what they promised last year, really the only thing I would say they promised and didn't deliver on was improving QB contain. So that gives me a lot of hope as we dive in now and we look at what they promised for this year and how that could play out in the course of gameplay. So first of all, we're going to look at adjustments on the defensive side of the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, they're introducing a new zone concepts. There's 10 new zone concepts. I'm going to highlight 8 of them in this podcast because I think they're the most relevant, and the other 2 really aren't much of a change. And so the first is a cloud flat zone. You can see the cloud flat zone on this screenshot here. This is from actual Madden 17 from the alpha build, and you see a cloud flat zone here. And what the cloud flat zone is going to do is it plays deep to short. All right, so it's going to play in that flat area, and it's going to take away deep routes first, and then it's going to move up to short once the deep routes are picked up by somebody else, or if there is no deep route. And so it can be countered by a play like curl flat, where the curl route will drive the defender up the field, and then the tight end slipping out on the flat route will be open because, he plays deep to shallow. The second new zone is another variation of the flat called the hard flat zone, and it is only going to worry about outside short routes. And so for the guys that are always hitting those flat routes to the tight end, they're hitting the flat route to the running back out of the backfield. A hard flat will not go up the field with the receiver. It's going to sit there on those routes and give you an effective weapon to take away flat routes where there really isn't one so far this year. The third new zone that I want to talk about is called the soft squat zone. It's another variation of a flat zone, and it's basically a flat zone that turns into man coverage on outbreaking routes. And so he's going to play the flat, but if you say Curse here runs a corner route, or Curse runs an out route, rather than sitting in man, that soft squat will sitting in zone, the soft squat will actually turn into man and follow Curse on the out route or on the corner route. And so it'll convert from zone to man if the route breaks to the sideline, which I think is a really cool concept. And then another version of the flat route is the quarter flat. And the quarter flat is going to man up on an outbreaking route, just like the soft squat, or it will carry a vertical route by an inside wide receiver up the field before it rallies back to a flat. And so the quarters flat route, say we had a slot receiver over here with Baldwin. Say Curse is over between Wilson and Baldwin, and he's running a vertical pattern. Before, you could hit that vertical pattern in the seam before it's picked up by the safety. But now with this quarter flat route, the quarter flat defender will actually carry Curse up the seam until he's picked up by the deep route and then rally to the flat to take away anything short. So it should give us another effective weapon to combat 4 verticals and some of these vertical seam passing concepts that have been so powerful through Madden 16. The next zone we want to look at is called a seam flat zone. The seam flat zone is going to man up outbreaking routes by inside wide receivers, slot wide receivers, or vertical routes against an inside wide receiver, but otherwise it'll stay in a zone. And so we look at Baldwin over here on the left side in the slot. If he runs an out route, if he runs a corner route, or if he runs a streak, he's going to be manned up by the seam flat zone. That guy's going to abandon his zone and go straight into man. But if he runs anything else, if he runs a slant, he runs a drag, anything like that, the defender's not going to man up on him. He's going to stay in that flat. So again, it's another hybrid zone that can turn into man based on route combinations. The sixth new zone we want to look at is called a 3 wide receiver hook. The 3 wide receiver hook you're going to see a lot of times out of man coverage. It does exist in some zone plays, but mostly in man. And it's simply a hook zone that drops towards the number 3 wide receiver. So whoever the number 3 wide receiver is, the slot guy, in this situation it would be Jimmy Graham as the number 3 receiving target. That hook zone is going to drop into his vicinity to help cover that number 3 receiver. The 7th zone that we want to look at is called a vertical hook. A vertical hook. Now the vertical hook is going to be like a hook zone, except it can convert to man against vertical concepts. So we go back to the idea of 3 verticals here. Let's put Baldwin in the slot between Graham and Kearse on the right side of the field. Normally, if you use that look and run 3 verticals, Graham and or Baldwin are going to be open up the middle of the field. But in this situation, the 3 wide receiver hook would drop to Graham, and the vertical hook would take Baldwin and man him up the field. And so vertical hooks are going to give us another way to combat vertical patterns, where instead of a hook zone standing there covering nothing, he'll actually man up on a receiver going down the field if there's nothing underneath for him to cover. And then the 8th and final new type of zone that I want to look at right now is called a mid-read or middle read. And that's essentially a hook zone by the middle linebacker only in cover 2 zone. And it's responsible for everything from the line of scrimmage all the way deep to splitting the gap of the deep safeties. So right now, if you call cover 2 zone, you'll notice that the middle linebacker, the hook zone drops a little deeper than the other 2 on the outside, but it still doesn't get deep enough, and you can attack over the top between the safeties. With this middle read zone that they're putting in this year, he's responsible for the line of scrimmage all the way to splitting the safeties, and so he should carry deep enough to take away until the safeties pick it up until he gets out of that gap, that no man's land. So it should make cover 2 less vulnerable to attacking deep down the middle, but it's going to open up some possibilities in the underneath game. This is where a levels concept comes in really handy, because if you take a guy deep and a shallow crosser, the middle linebacker's got to choose between one of the 2. And so that'll depend on if you take over-the-top coverage or underneath coverage pre-snap, what he's going to do. But regardless, it's a step strategically for the defense to be able to counter what the offense is doing. Now this year you're able to shade your coverage over the top, underneath, outside, or inside. You're still going to be able to do that next year. And underneath coverage is going to change all flat zones to hard flat zones. So again, the hard flat is the one that just sits shallow, only takes away underneath routes, and is not worried with any receiver going up the field. And so if you've got a guy who's constantly hitting the flats, if you call underneath coverage, no matter what flat you're in, it'll convert to a hard flat and shut that down. Over the top coverage is going to change any flat zone to a cloud flat, which is the one that takes away the deep and then rallies to the short routes. And so even if you're in a play with a hard flat and you call over the top coverage, it'll automatically convert to a cloud flat and be concerned with over the top plays before rallying to the flats. Another thing that's going to be really cool next year is they're implementing a wide receiver count. And so when you come up to the line of scrimmage, your defensive backs will put a wide receiver count, splitting the receivers into halves on the field. And that's going to allow the zones to play differently depending on the wide receiver count on certain sides of the field. It's going to tie into a system that EA is calling pattern matching. Okay, and so what pattern matching means is that these zone defenders, rather than guarding a specific area of the field, like they've done in the past, they'll now guard a specific receiver in that specific area. And so instead of a defender just sitting in the middle of the field with nobody there, or standing there and letting a receiver run across his zone, he'll actually pattern match that receiver until he leaves his zone. And so it's a subtle difference, but I think it's going to make a huge difference in defensive gameplay, that instead of guarding an area on the field, they will guard a receiver in that specific area. The other thing that's going to be huge out of this is that they're not just going to stand there and cover empty ground. They're going to find a place to cover someone. Where this is going to come in huge is if you have 3 receivers, say you're in cover 3 zone, and you have 3 receivers on the right side of the field, and they're all running deep, and no one's running deep on the left side of the field. In this year's version of the game, that deep defender on the left side where no one's going deep will just stand there. He won't drop, he'll just stand there because there's no threat. What that allows to happen is you manipulate plays where one of your three guys going deep on the right cuts across the field and there's no one there to cover him. And you've seen that from time to time. There's a play that I've run time to time that isolates that and causes it to happen. That won't happen next year. Next year, your deep defender will realize there's three guys going deep on the right side. There's only two defenders over there, and he will continue to drop, even though it's not his responsibility, anticipating someone coming across the field. Now, obviously, that's going to be tied to awareness and play recognition, but the fact that pattern matching in the game is going to be huge for the defensive side of the ball. Another thing that EA has given us clarification on is that beginning next year, there will be a bonus for clicking on and using defensive mechanics while the ball's in the air. There are a lot of people this year that said when the ball's in the air as a defender, you should not click on, just let the computer make the play. Well, next year, that's an option, but it's not a good option because you're going to get what they call a significant boost when you user the defense. So they're making it more about user on user. You should be clicking on to wide receivers. You should be clicking on to defenders, and you should be choosing what catch, how to play the receiver, and it's going to give you a bonus, swing the odds in your favor if you do that and your opponent doesn't. They're also billing a new physics feature, a new ball awareness feature, and the biggest thing where they said this will make a difference is in fumble recoveries. We've all had that moment where there's a fumble on the ground and one or even two of your guys will scoop over the ball and miss it completely before it's recovered by the other team. Well, next year, the way the ball behaves on the ground and the way your defenders or offensive players react to that ball should be much improved and much more realistic, resulting in less of those opportunities where you just miss the ball, more fumble recoveries by the guy that gets there first. Hopefully that'll alleviate some of the frustrations and randomness in the game. Some more keys on the defensive side of the ball on pass defense. There's now going to be a two-part battle between a wide receiver and a cornerback in man-to-man. And so previously, there's certain routes that always beat man. There's certain routes that never beat man. That's going to be no longer the case. So the first part of this battle between a wide receiver and a defensive back is going to be the defensive back's press versus the wide receiver's release. Now, whoever's higher isn't always going to win. They've got a better chance. But press versus release is going to determine the effectiveness of bump and run coverage. And then route running versus man coverage will determine off of the cut on the route who wins that interaction. So, for example, on a slant route, the defensive back jams the wide receiver at the line of scrimmage. If the defensive back wins that battle, the wide receiver gets an outside release. If the wide receiver wins, he'll get an inside release. And then the route running versus man coverage off of the cut, if the receiver wins that matchup, he's going to get separation for the quarterback to fit the throw. And if he doesn't, the corner may undercut the route or stick close to him. Now, it is possible to win one and lose the other. For example, your wide receiver could win the chuck at the line of scrimmage, get inside release, but still be undercut by the defensive back. And so it's going to be a more dynamic system. You're no longer going to have a corner route consistently beating man every time. You're no longer going to have an out route consistently beating man every time. Basically, any route with a cut can beat man, but no route will always beat man. And again, it's all going to be tied to your player ratings. And so Richard Sherman is not going to get burnt on a corner by a 70 overall receiver like you could do this year. Another thing they're implementing is a coverage crash. Now this year, if you drop a spy if you drop a quarterback spy, the quarterback leaves the pocket, you click the right stick, and it will send the spy after the defender or after the quarterback. Well, next season, you're not even going to have to drop a spy to do that. If you click the right stick, it's going to send the closest defender after the quarterback. And so if your quarterback's rolling out, there's no spy, but there's a flat defender with no one to cover, and you click the right stick, he'll abandon his zone and take after the quarterback. Which, again, I think is a really cool feature. We're not going to have to drop a spy every time we face the Ryan Ryans of Madden 17. Another cool thing that they're going to implement to go along with their new zone logic is something called defensive flip. And if you'll look at this screenshot I've got up here, this is the same coverage by the defense versus the same play by the offense, but the offensive formation is flipped. And so defensive flip will automatically flip your defense when the offense flips the play to ensure that your guys are lined up properly. Now you can disable that. It'll be up to you to decide if you want to do that or not, but defensive flip is going to be a cool feature, and it's going to actually tell you when your play was flipped and how it was flipped. Post or pre-snaps, you're aware of what's going on. Now there's a couple different ways you can flip the defense. The first is called run strength, which is going to align your defense to the side with the most tight ends and fullbacks, to the heavy side of the formation in an attempt to shut down the run. Then there is a pass strength defensive flip that aligns to the side with the most eligible wide receivers, which is what you would want to do in passing situations. And then there is a sub flip where the front seven is going to align run strength and the defensive backs will align pass strength. So as we move more into run defense now, for the first time, defenders are actually going to have gap assignments to play in the run game. Or they're going to have a hybrid responsibility in the pass / covering a gap if it is a run, or there's going to be hybrid responsibilities like that. So we've got a picture here. It shows the gaps that each player is responsible for, and then the linebackers, you see those orange lines, those are hybrid defenders. They have responsibilities in the pass, and they have responsibilities in the run. So if this is a run play, they're responsible for the gaps that those orange arrows go to. And again, it changes based on which side the play is run to. So here is the same assignments. If the play is run to the opposite side, it switches everything. And so you're going to have to be aware of that as you use your linebackers in Madden 17 to make sure you fill your gaps. Now, if the offense comes out in goal line and you come out in quarters 3 deep, there's going to be a lot of gaps unaccounted for. And so for the first time, there's actually going to be gap assignments on defense, and your offensive linemen are going to block to create lanes for the running back. And it should result in a more realistic and organic running game experience. Also, defensive linemen can read the play, and they can get out of their gap assignments to attack the running back. And so if a defensive lineman is assigned a gap and the play is going away from it, he will have the ability to get out of his assignment and attack the running back. But their success and their speed doing that is going to be tied to play recognition. So if you have a guy with poor play recognition on the D line, he may get out of his gap and allow a cutback for big yardage, or he may just not be able to get out of it. He doesn't read it quick enough. So play recognition will actually be important for defensive linemen next year. And then there's non-blitzing box defenders who are in read and react, which again, this is kind of like these linebackers. They're called read and react defenders. They're responsible for a gap, but they're also responsible for the pass. And so the higher their play rec, the quicker they're going to read the play and react to their specific assignment, and the less likely they are to be fooled by play action. So you're going to need high play recognition linebackers so they don't charge their gap on a play action and leave their passing assignment wide open. In addition to that, we've got some new types of run defenders, and I'm going to run through those really quick. The first is called a force defender, and you see it on the left side of the field up here by Benjamin. The force defender's job is to contain the outside and to force the run back inside. And so this year, toss play is extremely effective. Next year, there'll be force defenders whose job it is to contain the outside and force that play back inside. But again, they're not going to be in every play. It'll depend on your play choice whether these guys are there or not. Then if you look over to the other side, you see the C. That is the cutback defender. And he's the opposite of the force. He works with the force, but he plays conservatively on the backside to stop cutbacks. And so it allows the defensive line, the linebackers, to attack the ball carrier. And then the cutback guy is there if the running back tries to change direction and cut back. Next we have a fill defender. And fill defenders are simply guys that fill in gaps between the defensive linemen. These are often those read and react defenders that we talked about earlier with the orange lines that have responsibilities in both pass and run. The next type of new defender is a jet defender. And a jet defender is someone who blitzes or attacks their gap aggressively off the snap. They have no reads. And so essentially a blitzing linebacker or a safety is a jet defender. And they're represented on this picture by the red arrows. And finally, we have the last one is called a crack-replace defender. And that is basically a second force player that fills in for the force player if he's blocked by a wide receiver to make sure that you set the edge. And then one last note on defense, and we'll jump over to offense. They've implemented 2-gap defenders for the first time. And so up until this year, there was no logic for a defensive lineman controlling 2 gaps, which in 4-3 defense, a defender only fires 1 gap. In 3-4, they're responsible for 2 gaps on either side of the lineman they're lined up on top of. Well, this year, there actually are going to be linemen who play 2 gaps, which should give 3-4 defense a huge boost when it comes to D-line play. Now let's flip over to the offensive side of the ball where we don't have as much information yet, but I'll give you what I've been able to put together. One of the first things they've addressed is aggressive catching. Aggressive catching is going to be tuned next year, and there's actually going to be an increased chance of injury when you go for an aggressive catch. And so when you lob it downfield to your big receiver, he goes up for the aggressive catch, he exposes his body, and you're going to have the option to play receiver for a big hit, and it's going to increase injury chances for guys that repeatedly go up for aggressive catches. Another thing that I think is going to be a really cool feature is the throw out of sack feature. And so this year you hit the quarterback right as you're hitting him, he tries to throw the ball, and it's always an incompletion. It's frustrating because so often there's no way he should have even gotten the throw off. Well, this year, if you get hit while you're in the throwing motion, it can result in a fumble instead of always being an incompletion. And so it's something that you're going to have to pay attention to. It's more important than ever to get the ball out because it won't always be an incompletion. There's going to be reviews. There's going to be a process to determine in the game if the arm was moving forward or backwards. And you'll actually see strip sack fumbles. You'll see guys get hit while they're throwing for fumbles in the game this year. Also, running back types are going to matter this year. Your height, your weight, the elusiveness is going to matter this year. Smaller backs are going to be more effective spinning and juking. They're going to have better elusiveness. And then bigger backs are going to be more effective at trucking and stiff arming. So we're not going to see as many little speed backs running around, running over people next year. They're just not going to be able to do it as well as the big guys. There is also the new special moves that they're going to have. It's going to be in a tiered system. There's going to be special moves that are tied to body weight and ratings. And ball characters are going to use a range of different spin moves or juke moves ranging from elite to lumbering when you try to execute a move. And everyone is going to fall under the scale somewhere. Quarterbacks, defensive linemen that scoop up a fumble, they're all going to fall into this, all the way from lumbering to elite. And fatigue is also going to play a role in how effective your moves are. You can actually lower your move's effectiveness in Madden 17 by up to 10 points due to fatigue. And so if your guy's exhausted and he's got 98 trucking, all of a sudden he might just have 88 trucking, which I think is really cool. Finally, we're going to have tackle battles this year. For your big trucking backs, going against a linebacker or a safety, a good tackling safety, we'll have what's called a tackle battle. Whereas for an instant, they're both stood up, and the game is going to flash a random button up on the screen, and the first person to hit that button wins the tackle battle. And so for the defender, winning a tackle battle would be completing the tackle. For the offense, it's breaking that tackle. But it can be interrupted by another player. So if you get stood up, and right as the button comes up, another linebacker hits the running back, he's going to go down. He's not going to win that battle. But in one-on-one situations, we're going to have tackle battles, and I'm interested to see how that's implemented next year. I've got a couple more features, or a couple more screenshots I want to put up here just to show you guys that didn't really fit anywhere. One of them is this one that shows a new block system that's going to be in effect on extra points and field goals. Apparently it will now be possible to block extra points and field goals, and you're going to pick which side you want to come from. And if you're using one of the 3 block defenders and you time the snap perfectly, you're going to have a chance to block shed, steer your guy in, and block a kick. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Typically, Madden overstates new features, like how aggressive catch was so overpowered at the start of next year. So hopefully they don't do that with this. I don't want to see block kicks happening multiple times every game, but it would be cool to see it happen once or twice or 3 times a year. It'd be a cool feature. Here's just a picture of a new hurdle from their new hurdle system that they're going to have. So there's a couple of new screenshots. Now let's move on to a couple of other new features. Some of you guys probably don't know this, most of you do, that EA is the king at scrapping a feature that was popular and then bringing it back years later and calling it a new system. And so I've got 3 new, quote-unquote, new features that I want to show you that they are billing as new, but they're really recycled. And so the first is they've changed the kick meter for next year. And so here's a screenshot of the kick meter. It's basically the kick meter that was in Madden 07, but it's being billed as a brand new kick meter. And so it's going to be a 3-click kick system rather than using the joystick. It's going to be similar to like MLB The Show or Roy McIlroy Golf in how it works. And so you click once to start the meter, you click again to set the power, and then it swings back down and you click again to set the accuracy. And the higher power you have, the harder it's going to be to hit the accuracy. They say this is going to make it harder for the kicking game. Honestly, it seems like it would be easier to me because most of the time when I miss a kick, it's because I didn't flick up on the stick the correct direction. This just seems like it'll be a lot easier, but they say it's going to bring more intrigue and difficulty to the kicking game. And they also did announce there will be an Ice the Kicker feature this year, but there's no other details on that yet. The second feature they're bringing back and billing as new is the squib kick. Squib kicking. It was completely absent from this year's game. It'll be back next year, billed as a new feature, of course, because it wasn't in Madden 16. And then the other one is also a throwback to Madden 15. There's going to be a SWAT mechanic. And again, it's being billed as new because they didn't put one in this year. But next year, as a defender, you will have the choice to play the ball and go for the interception, play for the wide receiver and go for the big hit to dislodge the ball, or SWAT, which is just going to try to swat the ball down. It'll have a little bit bigger radius than an interception, but no chance for you to actually catch it. Now I want to tell you a little bit about an interview that I dug up with Rex Dickson. Rex Dickson is the creative director for EA Sports. And he was doing an interview with a sim football group talking about the game. And what was interesting to me is he kind of bashed the reveal trailer in the marketing department. He said that he's not excited about any of that stuff. He actually said that there's a lot of things that he wants to show in the reveal trailer, but he said it's just things that aren't really marketable to the mass audience. It's more marketed to the core group of people. And the marketing department's worried that people wouldn't latch onto it, and so they go with this spin move or this hurdle or Gronkowski being on the cover, and that's what they make the early game about. But he said, and I'll quote this, he said, quote, "The reveal trailer and current blogs are just a very superficial look at the game. There are several major changes coming that we haven't even talked about yet, and they're not insignificant changes. They are major bombshells. Major systems or pieces of the game that are changing fundamentally, and we haven't even talked about them yet." And he went on to say later that in the trailer and in these blogs, so much is being made about the ball carrier special moves, but he said the real story is going to be about zone blocking, and it's going to be about gap assignments and ball carrier locomotion and things that they're not even allowed to talk about yet. But you could tell that there's a lot of things that he's really excited about in this game, core gameplay things that haven't been revealed yet. And so what do I think about Madden 17? To be honest, I'm really excited for Madden 17. Rex started with Madden in Madden 13, but he really took over in Madden 25, and each year since Madden 25, I think the gameplay has gotten significantly better, and it's moving towards more realistic. Now that's taking aside desynchronization issues and server issues. I'm talking core gameplay here. Every year, I feel like Rex has moved the game to being more sim-oriented. Rex is a big football guy, he's a big sim-oriented guy, and he's a big CFM guy. And so I'm excited to see what they do with this game. I really think it's going to be another step in the right direction. I feel like every game since Madden 25 has just improved on the one before it, and I expect nothing different for Madden 17. And so as we wrap it up, I just want to run through my wish list of what I want to see in Connected Franchise next year. Now, not all of these, or even most of these, are probably actually realistic, but I'm going to run through them anyways. You guys can tell me what you think. You can give me some ideas if you've got any, and then at the end I'll kind of talk about if any of these I think can actually be implemented next year. And so the first thing I would love to see is a revamp of the invite system. It's beyond frustrating when you send an invite to your opponent, they accept it, and you just never get the "your game is ready to begin" a notification. I can't tell you how many times it's taken 30 minutes to start a game when it should take 2 because the system just doesn't work. And so I would like to see them scrap the invite system and come up with something that's very easy to always get into a game with your opponent. That's number 1. Number 2 for me, I would like to see them save desyncs at the point that they occurred. So for example, we're in the 3rd quarter. I'm up 31-17. The game desyncs. Right now, my options are to recreate or to start from scratch. But I would love to see them take a snapshot of the box score at the time of desync. You would have all the same stats, all the same score, and just pick the game up where it left off. My number 3 thing I want to see in CFM is sim win tuning. Right now, sim wins are utterly ridiculous. No sim win should ever end 77-0 with one quarterback throwing 8 touchdowns and the other throwing 12 interceptions. That's stupid. They need to tune these sim wins down. I love the ability to assign a win to a team so we don't have to mess with computer games. But it's not negating the issue of stat padding because sim wins in and of themselves pad stats. So I would like to see something more in line with the average stats for each team, where the team that we assign the win to obviously wins, but their statistics are more in line with what they do on average from week to week. The 4th thing I'd like to see is a draft board. I want the ability to set my draft board, and so even if I can't make the draft or if I accidentally let a pick slip by, the computer will just take the highest guy on my draft board. I know there was some talk about this last year from Rex. This is a feature I can definitely see being implemented for Madden 17. Number 5 on my wish list is to change the scouting. To be honest, I like the scouting system from last year a lot better. If I want to play man all the time, why do I care what a cornerback's zone rating is? I should be able to pick which traits I scout and not just unlock the top 3. But beyond that, I shouldn't be able to just scout a guy and see that his top rating is a B- and for 5 points take him off my draft board completely and know he's going to be worthless. The new scouting system this year basically makes it where you can have full scouting information on everyone worth drafting easily without buying the scouting upgrade, no skill involved. All you have to do is scout. If their first thing is a B-, take them off the board because they're not worth picking. Whereas you go back to the old system, I might have to scout 4 or 5 ratings before I figure out, hey, this guy's not going to be very good. So I want the old scouting system back, maybe a variation of it, but still have the combine. The combine is great. Number 6 on my wish list is to trade confidence for chemistry. I would like to scrap confidence. Confidence was too far on one extreme last year, too far on the other extreme this year to where it doesn't matter. It just gives everyone a boost. I would like to see us do away with confidence and instead put in a chemistry rating. And that chemistry rating could be affected by the guys that you have on your team, their personality ratings. And so you have some guys like Terrell Owens, who is a great player, but an absolute cancer in the locker room. And so you can put him on your team, but he's going to impact your chemistry negatively. On the flip side, you might have some guys that will never see the field, but they're vets that they're good for the locker room and they bring that chemistry rating up. And I also think chemistry should be impacted by the trades that you do. So the less your guys have played together, the lower their chemistry, just like in real life. And as they play together, that chemistry rises. They begin to play better as a unit, and they get attribute bonuses from that rather than confidence. Number 7 on my CFM wish list is to redo contracts. The truth is, guys just don't want enough money in Madden. And if you have cap issues after Season 2, it's because you're a moron. I mean, with the way we can develop rookies, with the way guys will re-sign with you without ever testing the market, the salary cap is non-existent in Madden. I think guys should test free agency more. I mean, tie it to a loyalty rating or something. Some guys are going to be more loyal. They'll re-sign, maybe even at a discount. But some guys are going to test free agency. No player gets to the end of their contract without signing an extension, and then days before free agency starts, signs a contract with a team for half their market value in real life. And yet that happens all the time in Madden. You see, like last Madden, when we had the crazy bidding war on the defensive ends that came available, and they got paid $200 million over 7 years. And then guys their caliber only asking for like $5 million a year to re-sign with your team. Guys should go more for what their market value is. And I would love to see where you have to make tough decisions regarding your salary cap, who to keep and who to let go. Number 8 thing I would love is an energy system, similar to the 2K system, where there's progressive fatigue as the season goes on. And so you're not going to have a running back taking 30 to 35 carries a game, every game, all season, without beginning to fatigue. This would make it important to have depth. It would make it important to get your backup running backs, your backup wide receivers some reps in games, rather than always rolling with your starters and not having to worry about fatigue at all. Number 9, I'd like to see them redo game prep. I think everyone on your team should get practice reps. And maybe you pick a few to focus on, but everyone should be consistently getting better in practice as the week goes on. In this version of Madden, you essentially get to pick one person to work on, and if you work on them for an entire year, you might raise an attribute 2 or 3 points. That's just not realistic. In real life, every guy gets practice reps every day, and I'd like to see that more reflected in Madden. Number 10, I want to see us be able to hire coordinators. Hire coordinators who have different developmental specialties. And so, for example, the Eagles just hired defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz this offseason, and he's known for his attacking defenses that are able to get after the quarterback, harass quarterbacks, and shut down running games. And so maybe if I hire Jim Schwartz as my defensive coordinator, all of my defensive linemen and my linebackers get a +2 or a +3 at block shedding and power move, to reflect the fact that he's a defensive coach who's very aggressive and gets the most out of his D-line. Maybe you maybe you hire an offensive coordinator that's a genius quarterback whisperer type guy, and so your quarterback gets +2 or 3 to all of his accuracy ratings, or +1 to his throw power. Give us some options with coordinators to immerse ourselves more in the gameplay and manage our teams how we want. The 11th thing I'd like to see is rookie ratings be changed. I think it'd be awesome to unlock rookie ratings through practice and through in-game reps. And so instead of drafting a guy and the instant he's drafted, you get his complete stats and know, hey, this guy's great, or hey, he's not very good, I need to draft someone else to fill his position. Real NFL teams don't have that ability. So they take someone, they don't know if he's going to turn out to be good or not. They have to get him in practice, get him in OTAs, get him in preseason and see. So instead of unlocking your ratings, I would like to see you unlock a range of ratings when you draft a guy. So maybe I draft a running back and I know that he has somewhere between 75 and 85 carry. And I know he's got somewhere between 60 and 75 trucking. And as I practice with him, as I go through preseason games, as he gets game reps, I begin to unlock those ratings and the window shrinks until I get his actual true rating. I just think that would be an awesome system that would give meaning to preseason and add a lot more intrigue to the draft. And finally, number 12, as we wrap it up, I would love to see CFM copy a lot of NBA 2K's My GM mode. I've been playing My GM mode a lot lately on 2K, and the level of immersiveness is unbelievable. With the actions you take as a general manager, they have impacts on your players' morale and trust, on free agents' trust, on your owner's trust, your staff's trust, the press trust. Every action that you take is involved. You have conversations with players about what they want when they're unhappy, and you have guys that want traded because they're unhappy on your team. I would just love to see a lot more immersion into connected franchise mode. Now, out of all of these, again, a lot of these are pie in the sky, what I would love to see probably never happen. But things that I do think have an opportunity to happen this year are the first 4. Specifically, the invite system and the draft board. I do think a draft board is going to be announced. I do think we're going to have the ability to do that, and I do think they're going to attempt to make it easier to get into games. I would love to see desync saves and sim win tuning. I think we're going to definitely see some sim win tuning. I don't know about saving desyncs. There may be more technologically that goes into that than I'm aware of. But those are the things that I would like to see in CFM. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you got some good information about Madden 17. I'll continue to keep up with it. I'm sure we'll have a more CFM specific show down the road as they announce more details, and we'll talk about some of what's going on and what's coming out in Madden 17. So hope you guys enjoyed the show. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you want to see in CFM and what you're most excited about that's been revealed already from Madden 17, and some things that you would like to see them announce in the future. Thanks, guys.